Leader of the House, Ms. Indranee Rajah.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for allowing me to join the debate. The motion moved by Mr. Leong Man Wai is that this House affirms its commitment to the need for the Speaker of Parliament to be independent and impartial, and for Parliament to be a fair arena for all. Insofar as what he means by independent, though, it was clear from his speech that by independent he meant either non-partisan or not a member of a political party. So to that extent, I cannot agree with his motion, but I do agree that a speaker needs to be fair, impartial, and to act independently. So for that reason, I would be able to agree with the first part of the amendment which Mr. Vikram Nair has moved, which is that this House affirms its commitment to the need for the Speaker of Parliament to discharge his duties independently and impartially, and for Parliament to be independently and impartially. The second part of Mr. Leong's motion seeks the House affirmation that Parliament should be a fair arena for all. That too, I agree, except that when it comes to being a fair arena for all, it means that all members must participate in this and act and conduct themselves appropriately. Hence, we have the standing orders, which are supposed to govern the conduct of members vis-à-vis each other, and also the Parliamentary Privileges, Immunities and Powers Act, which sets out what members should and shouldn't do, and what it means when you have privileges as a member of Parliament, how you should act and not abuse them. And therefore, I agree with the second part of the amendment moved by Mr. Vikram Nair, which is that this House should also affirm its commitment to uphold the standing orders of Parliament and the obligations under the Parliament Privileges, Immunities and Powers Act. And if we all conducted ourselves accordingly, you would have a fair arena for all. In this regard, before I go on to explain why I support the amended motion, may I just clarify with Associate Professor James Lim, because I heard him say that he supported the motion, but I wasn't sure whether he meant the original motion or whether he meant the amended motion.
Associate Professor James Lim.
I support the original motion, and I will also support the amended motion.
Ms. Indranee Rajah.
I thank Associate Professor James Lim for his clarification. So let me move on to the first point about the need for the Speaker to be fair and impartial. The major Commonwealth democracies all recognize the need for the person holding the role of Speaker to act in an impartial manner when discharging his or her duties. And Singapore is no different. Speakers must behave in an impartial manner in the discharge of their duties, and successive speakers of our Parliament have acknowledged this. The question is, how is this to be achieved? And the underlying assumption or presupposition put forward by PSP is that you can only achieve this if the Speaker is independent of any political party. That's their underlying premise. And the premise is that the Speaker should not have any political association, so he or she can be perceived to be completely neutral. Well, what does our law provide? The Constitution sets out the eligibility requirements for the Speaker. MPs, except those who are ministers or parliamentary secretaries, are eligible, and non-MPs are also eligible, but the Constitution requires that such persons must be persons who are qualified for election as a member of Parliament, such as being a Singapore citizen, above the age of 21, and resident in Singapore for at least 10 years in aggregate. So our Constitution also recognizes that MPs can be the speakers, i.e. members of a political party. Thus, under our law, any person who meets these eligibility requirements can be elected as the Speaker. So PSP's proposal to require a Speaker to be independent in the sense of not being a member of a political party or not being an MP is actually not in accordance with and much more limiting than the constitutional requirements. That's the first point. The second point is, what is the practice and the reality around the world? Actually, you will find that in most of the major Westminster-style democracies like ours, the Speaker comes from the majority party. And this is true of the current speakers of the Australia House of Representatives, the Canadian House of Commons, and the New Zealand House of Representatives, all of whom are from the majority party in those parliaments. In the US, the Speaker of the House of Representatives is also usually from the majority party in that House. The identity of the Speaker is typically determined by the party members at the organizing caucuses held soon after the new Congress is elected. So, in short, the Speaker is somebody who can receive the support of the majority of the House, and that will very often be somebody from the majority party, and this arrangement reflects the reality that the person has to receive a majority of the votes in Parliament to be appointed Speaker. And it's quite natural for a candidate from the majority party to be in a position to receive the majority of votes. It's also important to bear in mind that the majority party would have derived its majority from the voters. You don't get to be a majority party without the majority of votes. It is the electorate, it is the voters who put the PAP in Parliament as a majority. So you have to bear in mind that the mandate of the majority party is drawn directly from the people. And the person put up for election as the Speaker, if he or she has the confidence of the majority, then he or she gets appointed as the Speaker. And it's not always a given that a nominee from the majority party will always be able to command the support of the majority of MPs, or that the nominee may necessarily be from the majority party. For example, the current Speaker of the US House of Representatives was appointed as Speaker only after 15 ballots were taken, despite receiving his party's nomination for Speaker earlier. So, for the first 14 ballots, he did not manage to obtain a majority of the votes. This is not the only system in practice. There are different ways of doing it, and our practice is in sync with other major democracies. Each country has to decide what works best for them. More importantly, the parliaments have to choose the right individuals. So, just having someone who is non-partisan or not a member of any political party doesn't guarantee you the outcome that you would like. The UK, for example, has a convention where the Speaker resigns from his or her political party upon being appointed as Speaker. So, ostensibly neutral, ostensibly bipartisan. The convention also extends to the Speaker's seat not being contested by the major political parties and the Speaker not campaigning on political issues. But even though the UK has taken these steps, that doesn't guarantee the desired outcomes. As Mr. Lim Bao Chuan highlighted earlier, the UK system did not prevent one of their former speakers from being put in a position where he was accused of bias. The former speaker was mired in controversy by accepting certain procedural amendments and rulings. In short, I don't need to go into details, but in short, he was alleged of bias on issues, i.e. of not supporting Brexit as opposed to remaining. So you can have bias on issues or alleged bias on issues. And also, he had separately had complaints leveled against him for bullying. This does not have to do with his rulings in the chamber, but he was the subject matter of an independent expert panel, and they found that his behavior fell very far below that which the public had a right to expect from any member of parliament, and it was so serious that had he still been a member of parliament, because the committee's rulings came out, or determinations came out after he stepped down, the committee said, we would have determined that he should be expelled by resolution of the House. As it is, we recommend that he should never be permitted a pass to the parliamentary estate. So having somebody who is non-partisan, not a member of a political party, does not guarantee you the results that you want. At the end of the day, it boils down to how the individual holding the office of Speaker conducts himself or herself. And it is very important that the Speaker is mindful of the duties and obligations that come with the office. But equally, it is important for the MPs to be mindful of the duties and obligations that come with their office, whether they be ministers or backbenchers, and to not make it difficult for the Speaker, because in making it difficult for the Speaker, you also force the Speaker to have to make rulings. It is incumbent upon MPs to not disregard the authority of the chair, to be familiar with the standing orders, to know what the standing orders mean, and if referring to articles or principles or sections, to actually know which articles and sections they are referring to, and to not misrepresent proceedings in Parliament, and essentially comply with the standing orders. So it works both ways. For Parliament to function effectively, properly, and importantly to gain the respect of people, the Speaker has to do his job, but equally all MPs and ministers have to do their jobs. So in conclusion, what I would like to do is to just highlight some quotes in respect of previous speakers which really illustrate the point that I'm making, which is at the end of the day, it is about the individuals. It's about how the individual in the Speaker's chair conducts himself or herself. Previous speakers of Parliament in Singapore have earned praise and respect from both sides of the House, even though they were a member of a political party. So, for example, in 1995, Mr. J.B. Jeyaretnam said, when he spoke on the reappointment of Mr. Yeoh Ghim Seng as Speaker, and Mr. Yeoh, as you know, was a PAP MP, Mr. J.B. Jeyaretnam said this: "Mr. Speaker, sir, may I, as it were from the other side of the House, give you my very sincere and hearty congratulations on your election. We have heard from the leader about your long reign in this House, but I, Mr. Speaker, sir, have only been under your rule for 3 years after I entered this House in December 1981. But may I say, Mr. Speaker, sir, that during that short time of 3 years, you have gained greatly my respect and admiration for the charm and tact with which you brought to bear to this high office that you have held with such esteem, that you hold with such esteem and honor. It has not always been easy for you, and sometimes I think it has been made trying, and my only hope is that I did not contribute in any way to your trials." That was Mr. J.B. Jeyaretnam. Then, in 1989, Mr. Chiam See Tong had this to say of Mr. Tan Soo Khoon, who was Speaker and also a PAP MP and not a lawyer. Mr. Chiam said, "Mr. Speaker, sir, if you will just allow me a moment also to convey my congratulations on your elevation to the speakership. Sir, I think it would not be complete if it is just the leader of the House conveying his congratulations to you. This is to make it complete. You have the approval of the whole House. I would also like to say a word of thanks to the previous Speaker who had very good rapport with the opposition." And also, speaking on when Mr. Tan Soo Khoon ended his appointment as Speaker in 2002, after 13 years in that role, Mr. Low Thia Khiang from the Workers' Party rose to record his views that, as follows: "Mr. Tan Soo Khoon, as Speaker of the House, has won my respect for being fair most of the time, if not all the time, and that being a non-PAP member, I have not felt discriminated, and I think this is important as he was the Speaker." So that Mr. Speaker, concludes the essential premise which I'm making, which is at the end of the day, it is about the individual, how he or she conducts themselves, and about making sure that all of us do our part in Parliament.